Hello, welcome to The Wandering Drew. I am Drew. On today's episode, I'd like to discuss what is, in my opinion, the most common injury that affects hikers, or backpackers for that matter. It is estimated that 50% of all hikers are affected by this injury. I think those numbers are actually much higher. Stay tuned for a discussion on this common injury. Welcome back. Thank you for joining me. Well, have you figured out what today's topic is going to be? What injury we're talking about? Well, it's a foot injury and it's blisters. A blister is formed when there's an injury to the top layers of the skin. Your skin is actually multiple layers stacked up on top of each other that are kind of stuck together. The skin that's on the outside of your body is usually more flexible than the skin that's on the inside because it's not anchored to your organs and your bone. So therefore, it has more flexibility to move. It actually moves more than the skin underneath it. When you're doing a certain activity and you have repeated pressure or heat or friction build up, mostly friction in this case is usually going to be the problem, you have a shearing force between the layers. And eventually that shearing force sometimes cause them to have little tears or micro tears or to separate at the layers, which is already a weak point. And the body's normal reaction to this is to send fluid into those small micro tears to try and prevent the injury from spreading to the other layers. And that fluid heading there is what becomes the blister in our mind, where it fills up like water or the fluid like a balloon or a bubble in the skin. The fluid that's usually inside the blister can be anywhere from a clear color to slightly tinged either yellow or brownish. And that's quite normal. Doesn't mean anything else, it's just the normal color that that fluid will be. The best way of dealing with blisters is not to get them, but that's not always possible. So I'm going to first discuss some preventative measures, then we'll discuss what to do if you do get a blister. Since a blister is formed by repeated exposure to friction, the best way is to avoid having that repeated contact or repeated friction. Now this could be between your skin and, let's say, your sock or your shoe, which is rubbing against the skin and causes the blister. But it doesn't necessarily always have to be your feet. It could be your hands, anyone that's used a shovel sometimes or a broom, or certain tools without using gloves maybe has gotten a blister. You can also get them in other places. I've received them on my shoulders or my hips from the belt that is on my pack, or even the shoulder straps on my pack rubbing as I walked throughout the day. So don't think it's only limited to your feet, because it could be anywhere on your body that your skin. This is a normal reaction to the skin to friction. Now, I mentioned the best way of avoiding having to deal with a blister is not to get one. And we do that by keeping out, obviously reducing friction, but keeping our skin clean and dry. When the skin becomes wet, like when you've taken a bath or a shower, you realize the skin is hydrated and it gets wrinkled. And in that case, it's more prone or likely to get a tear or injury to it. So if you can keep your skin dry and clean, then you reduce your chances already of getting a blister. Now, while we're hiking, that's not always easy. It's not usually necessarily the cleanest environment, and it's certainly not the driest. While we're walking, to stay dry would mean we're reducing sweat, which we normally get from walking or hiking, especially during the hotter months. But we're trying to avoid rain, maybe water from a stream or a lake that you walk through, puddles on the trail. and even walking early in the morning when there's a lot of dew out. So all these things tend to wet our feet and increase the likelihood of getting a blister. And clean is limited also on what we can do in the environment, but you can keep your feet clean somewhat. When you put them in your sock, they should be clean. If you're going for a multi-day trip, obviously that may not be as possible as other times, but it still can be done. You can wipe them down at night, wash them, use a baby wipe if you have them, or a rag or a bandana to wipe them down. Certainly letting them air out and wiping them off, getting as much dirt as possible off of them, will go a long way to keeping your feet clean and healthy. One of the things that many hikers will do is stop for either lunch or a snack or maybe in a bathroom break and take their shoes off, let their feet air out. You can also take your socks off to let your feet air out and the socks air out as well. Or like me and many other hikers, we carry a second pair of socks. And that's a great time to change your socks and put on the dry pair on your feet and let your old pair that is now wet or from the morning hike, put them on your backpack and let them dry out as you hike in the afternoon. And this is a very common thing you'll see a lot of hikers do to keep their feet dry. And it can be quite effective in keeping your feet happy. And you'd be surprised at how good it feels to put on a clean, dry pair of socks to make your feet feel good, even when you're in the middle of the day and you still have many more miles to go. Another thing we need to do is learn to listen to our feet. Anytime we feel some sort of discomfort, a hot spot as we call it, you feel friction, something rubbing that doesn't feel right, you need to stop as soon as possible. And I understand how hard this is, and I've done it myself where I figure, I'll stop in a little while. I'm making good mileage now, and I feel like I'm getting in the groove, and I don't want to stop right now. Or I'm in the middle of a climb up a hill or a mountain, I'm making good time, and I think I want to keep doing this. I don't want to stop now and lose that momentum. But realize that by continuing, more than likely, you're causing a blister. So it goes against stopping. It's natural for us to want to continue to push on. But by stopping, you're actually preventing a blister, which enables you to hike farther and faster and better later on. It's also very hard sometimes when you're in a group to tell everyone to stop and hold up because you need a couple of minutes to fix your feet. But it is exactly what you probably should be doing. I myself am guilty of this and have hiked sometimes many hours more thinking it'll be okay. And almost always it hasn't been. It's been a blister. So I cause more pain for myself by causing less pain or discomfort now. It's easier to stop and fix your feet and address the issue than it is to continue hiking and have a blister later. But we all have to learn that from experience as well. Some good news is that repeated exposure to certain activities does toughen up our feet. Just like a guitar player will develop calluses on their fingertips to prevent injury, so our feet react the same way. And if you hike fairly often, you will develop calluses in certain parts of your body where they're getting repeatedly exposed to friction in order to prevent future injury. There are differences of opinion on whether having calluses on your feet are good or bad. Some say it's good because it prevents injury. It's obviously the natural body's response to repeated contact to friction. However, there are also some people that will say this is bad because the skin is less flexible when you have no injury and no calluses. And you're prone to get a blister then next to the callus or even underneath it, which can be very hard to treat because it is covered by this hard skin. My approach has been to try and prevent getting a blister in the first place. And there are a lot of different methods to do that. And some of them are hit and miss. And I don't believe there's any one method that is foolproof or what everyone needs to do. I think it's much like dieting. I think we're all different and you have to find what works for you. And there are many different ways to get to the same trip, so to say, the same journey of preventing this blisters to your feet. So you just have to find something that works for you and keep with it. The last 3 to 4 years, I have not had a blister while hiking. And I think it's due to the fact that I am pretty aggressive and I try to take care of my feet. We walk on our feet, so I take care of them because they're what gets me from point A to point B. And it is probably, in reality, if you're hiking, it's one of the most important pieces of your equipment and you have to take care of them. And I'm sorry, I'm going to be looking over because I have some stuff next to me. But approaches to preventing blisters are a combination, and many people all have their own opinion of what works for them. And it may in fact work for them, but it may not work for you. Many athletes, joggers and runners will use Vaseline or petroleum jelly on their feet to prevent blisters and reduce friction. And this is effective in the case of doing a run or a jog because it's a short-term event. But if you're doing a long hike or a multi-day hike and you're going to be out for several hours, this may not be as effective because of the fact that the petroleum jelly obviously will wear off and some of it will be absorbed by the skin, but it also increases the amount of moisture that's in the skin. And much like we discussed earlier, when your feet get wet, if you're taking a bath or a shower, we all know our feet get that pruning look on them, and that's from over moisturization, really. The water has hydrated the skin to the point that it is actually changed its appearance. So due to the fact that there's so much water there, it's more likely to get small tears and the friction to affect it. So there are some thoughts that using these products will overly hydrate the skin and actually make them more susceptible to getting a blister. So I would say, any of these things I'm going to mention now, you try them, see if they work for you. And if you find that they don't, then switch to something else. It just didn't work for you. It doesn't mean it's not a good method of reducing blisters. It just means it's not one that worked for you and your skin or whatever activity you're doing. Because a lot of these will work. And you'll have fans of them, and you'll have people that don't like them and say they don't work. And I think it's really individualized to each person and what worked for them. So it might work for you. So that's some of it. I do have some other things here that I'm going to bring up and just show and mention briefly. So you'll see me looking over. Moleskin, I have not had much success with moleskin. Even as a Boy Scout and Cub Scout, they always throw out moleskin. And I don't even waste my money and time buying it. I find it doesn't stay stuck to the skin. Your skin has to be really clean and dry. Moleskin does not hold up to the rigors of hiking, in my opinion. I find that it will tend to shift from the spot where it's been placed and actually sometimes curl up, and then now it is causing irritation to my skin and possibly causing a blister. So I don't even waste my time with it. What I do like and what I do now is my current thing is using KT tape. This is KT tape. I bought blue because I like blue, obviously, and it differentiates from other stuff. I've had red KT tape in the past. I've had black. I usually buy whatever I can find that's cheapest and meets the bill. And KT tape is really good. I find this to be the best product. It's a weaves product. It has a good adhesion. It stays where I put it. I can actually use KT tape. I've used it up to 3 days hiking without having to replace it before it fell off. So I find it very effective. However, it is more pricey and expensive than all the other options generally that I use. However, if you're able to use KT tape for a multi-day hike, you'll find that it actually becomes more cost-effective. KT tape is a pair of shears that you can cut the tape off. A small knife will work as well, but a scissor just works better. And if you can round out the edges, either with your knife or a scissor, if you have maybe a Swiss Army knife, you can forego that and use the scissor. But if you round out the edges, you'll notice it won't curl as much and become an irritant. If you're going to place it on your feet, don't just cover the area. For instance, let's say this is the bottom of my foot and this is the ball of my foot. Don't just cover the bottom of your foot with a small patch like a Band-Aid. Use it from one end of your foot to the other, going across. Okay, you don't have to wrap it because you don't want to waste the product, but I would generally go higher and wider. And I would normally use 2, sometimes even 3 layers going down my foot to prevent it. The balls of my feet are where I generally put tape. I don't have problems with the heels. That's another common area. A lot of people get blisters in the back of their foot on the heel from where there's rubbing with the shoe in the back. If that's the case, you don't put it across the whole back of your foot. And there are some people that will tape their whole feet up all the time. I have found that since I've been using tape, I do not get blisters anymore. So that's KT tape. Another product I've used is Leukotape. The problem with Leukotape, it doesn't have a backing and it wraps on itself like regular tape. And with the heat and over time, if you have a very big roll like this, you'll find it gets very, very sticky and very, very hard. It has excellent adhesion. One note of caution, because it adheres so well, it's hard to work with and manipulate. It'll stick to your fingers, and if you put it in the wrong spot, it's hard to get off and then reuse it. It'll stick to itself as well. Rounding out the corners does work very well. This will easily last 2 to 3 days. Even if you're getting wet sometimes, it'll still stick to your skin, which is great. If you have an injury like a blister, on your foot and you cover it with Leukotape, or you pull off that tape, I can almost guarantee you that you're going to pull the blister off as well, which will be quite painful. Trust me, it will pull the skin off with the tape. So you want to be careful in doing that. The best bet sometimes is just leave it on there and not take it off and wait till it weakens and you're able to take it off. A common thing that I'll do with these type of products is I will take them into the bath or shower with me and use soap. And I will soap up the product so that the soap gets onto where the adhesive is and it breaks that bond and it makes it easier to take off. It's like a strong Band-Aid. You got to be careful pulling it off. It's going to take your skin though. This is really where you need to be cautious in pulling it off and work slowly and make sure you don't pull the skin off with it, because it will do that and it's quite painful. I've done that once or twice, so trust me. I've even used duct tape in a pinch to cover a injury, or just tape my feet when I ran out of Leukotape. So I usually try to bring more than less, but it is heavy than other products, so I try not to take it all. That's the problem that I don't like about Leukotape, is unless you buy a small roll, if you buy a big roll to make it cheaper, you have to rewrap it on something, almost like duct tape is, and it does ruin some of that adhesion. KT tape is much better because I can take it off the roll, fold it up, stick it in a plastic bag, and then use it as I need to on my hike. So I highly recommend the KT tape. It's probably the best option. Another option that can be done to cover your skin is liquid bandage or Second Skin. This is a generic brand of liquid bandage, or basically it's like liquid nail polish. It dries hard. This has an antiseptic included in it, so it's good for cuts. I'm already carrying this to cover up cuts. If you have a cut on certain areas like your knee or in the webbing of your hand, it's very, very hard to keep a Band-Aid on it, especially when you're hiking, because most Band-Aids will come off with water. So I will frequently use Second Skin or liquid bandage to cover that. And you can use that on your feet as well. It'll form a hard barrier, dry, and then it'll act like a skin over your ball of your feet or wherever the blister is and protect it further. This is all preventative, so I wouldn't put this on a blister necessarily. If I've got a blister, it's gone too far, I waited too long. These are all preventative measures that you can do. So the Second Skin is a good option. Another thing you can do is certain type of lubricants, like we mentioned, Vaseline or petroleum jelly. They do have foot care. This is just some cream, foot cream that you can use and put it on in the morning. It is slippery and slick. It will help coat your skin. This is a powder. There's ordinary foot powders. This just happens to be one of them that you can put into your sock or your shoe. It'll absorb moisture. It'll obviously reduce friction. Be careful with these though. There's a lot of thought that these become like a paste. If you use too much of it or it gets too wet, it becomes like a paste itself. And this, in fact, may become the irritant that causes a blister. I haven't really had any problem. It's not like I'm using too much of it, but I could see where this could, in high quantities, become like a paste, like in your shoe, if you use way too much of it. If you're trying to dry out your feet or your shoe and you use a lot of this, I could see that. This is called Blister Shield. This is a micro-fine powder. It's pretty slippery. You put it on your fingers, it just glides. It's like a talc, very fine talcum powder. That product that is used, and it probably has some other stuff in it, but it's an extremely fine lubricant, and you can throw that on your feet. A light dusting, it goes a long way, or before you put your sock on, and this will keep your feet from developing friction and you getting a blister. Another product that I've tried and I really like it, and I'm going to support, it's made by a veteran, I believe a Special Forces member of our country. So it's made in America, and it's called Trail Toes. And it is basically a extreme anti-friction cream with like a body cream. So you can use it anywhere on your body, but it's made for long distance. If you get wet, this will help protect it from the moisture. And I find it really good. It comes in these individual, you can buy a big one, but I bought individual packs because I can put these in my pack, carry them, and I can use one a day for both my feet. So I would cut it open, squeeze a little out, work it into my feet. You can do it at night if you wanted to moisturize them. I do it during the morning if I'm going to use this. So I'll squeeze a little bit on my feet, work it in between the toes a lot, and along the ball of the feet, let it dry a little bit, and put my sock on. And I do that on both feet in the morning, part of my taking care of them. And what this does, it keeps them lubricated and hydrated, but it also protects it from outside moisture from coming in. So if you're getting wet, you'll notice that this will help prevent some of that pruning effect you get from over moisture. I did use this on the Ocean to Lakes Trail, and I did even lend it to some of the other members of my group, and I didn't hear any complaints about it. They seemed to like it, so it seemed to help out. So those are all options. Another option that you can do, and this is going the other way, as in toughening your feet, is a product called Tough Foot. And this was originally designed for animals on their pads or the paws of dogs, for hunting dogs, or even horses, I believe. But it does work on humans as well. And what this does is this causes the skin to become harder, thereby reducing the chance of getting an injury, or a blister in this case. And I have tried this for about a week or two. I did notice my pads of my feet, the undergarment did become harder. They also tinged a little slightly brown or yellowish because of the color of the product. But I didn't really find much of a difference or an effect in it. I seem to notice that I like when my feet are softer than when they're calloused or harder. I usually just have a callus on the ball of my feet from walking barefoot and hiking. I don't get usually calluses anywhere else or blisters at all anymore. And that's because almost every morning I'm using some type of product to either insulate the friction or to lubricate my feet. Another product I use sometimes in between hikes, if your feet have been particular, is this Healthy Feet. It's a cream. You use it in the morning or at night, and it's to take care of feet. If you have feet that are really cracked and dry, this is a good product to use. If you have feet that maybe after a hike you come back and they're kind of not too good, I found this product worked good. I used it after I came back from the Ocean to Lake Trail, because even though I had taped my feet, being wet for so many hours did tend to mess them up a little bit, and this helped moisturize them upon my return. I only used it for a couple of days. I've given it to other people that have perpetual calluses on their feet, and they've told me there's some improvement in that. So it did help remove calluses from their toes and from the balls of their feet. And some of these have been there for quite some time. So this product does work, and I can only recommend it based on that experience. So those are some of the products you can use to reduce your likelihood of getting a blister. The best thing to do, though, honestly, is just keep them clean and dry. If you can change your socks, air them out every once in a while, brush off any dirt, just use a bandana or even your sock. I usually use my sock itself. Brush off the dirt at night, and before you put your socks on, make sure they're clean and nothing's on them. You don't want to put anything, let's say you have a piece of leaf or something stuck on your foot and you put it in your shoe, and then you hike all day with that leaf being stuck there. That's going to irritate your feet and increase the likelihood of you getting a blister at that location. So just using a little bit of care will assist you in keeping your feet clean and dry and happy and healthy. So what if you already have a blister, or you've done some of these preventative measures and it just didn't work for you? You still have a blister. Now what do you do? Well, they recommend you leave the blister intact. In other words, you don't puncture it as being the best thing. I don't agree with that, because we're hiking usually. We usually have more miles to go, and we have to continue walking. Not to mention, blister is painful and uncomfortable because of the pressure that's inside this blister, this bubble of skin that now has this pressure-packed water or fluid inside of it. So the best thing I feel is to drain the blister and relieve the pressure, which relieves the pain and discomfort. The best way to do this is, obviously, you want to clean your hands if possible, clean your skin if possible. If you have alcohol wipes, clean your skin, clean your hands, and you want to clean if you have a needle. I happen to carry a sewing kit all the time. I have a needle in there. If not, the tip of your knife will do. Any small pin or something you can puncture this blister with will work, but you want to clean it or sterilize it. If you don't have alcohol, use a flame or a match or a lighter, heat it up, let it cool down enough so that it's sterilized, and then you can use it to puncture the blister and drain the liquid from the inside of the blister. Now, draining the blister is best done the sooner you do it. The sooner you do it, the more likelihood you can get the blister drained and the skin back together. And this is important because if you can do that fast enough, there's a possibility that you can have the skin re-adhere to each other and heal, which will increase exponentially the healing time. Ordinarily, a blister will take about a week to heal on its own. However, it's highly unlikely that you're going to catch it in time, or be able to drain it and keep the skin together without going hiking more and putting more pressure and friction on this injury. So more than likely what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to take, let's say this is my blister and this is the rest of the skin. If my blister is here, you would take a pin or a needle or even your knife tip after it's been cleaned and sterilized and puncture and you can do it in multiple places if you can. Puncture it 1 or 2 places, and if you just put a little pressure on it with like a gauze, a clean gauze is the best thing, or even a bandana if you don't have anything else, whatever, any cloth will do, and what will happen is the fluid will then come out of those holes and it'll flatten. And if you can keep it flat, usually in the first day or 2, it will fill up again. If you can continue to do this several times, you're going to have to at least do it 2 to 3 times a day, morning and night, and you may have to do it in the afternoon even to relieve that fluid that's in there. If you can keep it flat, the skin might re-adhere to each other if you catch it soon enough. I've never had that happen. It's usually at the end of the day when you stop for the afternoon or the night and you notice you have a blister that you generally are doing this. But if you can drain the blister, keep it flat, then put a piece of gauze over it and wrap it with tape to keep it, when the pressure on it and the gauze to collect any fluid that continues to leak out of it. That is your preferred method. Realize that it will most likely fill up again and you'll have to drain it again, especially like I said, in the first 2 days. It will generally fill up. After that, it begins healing and the body will begin to reabsorb that fluid and the blister will collapse and then the skin will heal. For those first several days, you want to monitor the blister and your skin and see how it's progressing. Another option, and I've never done it myself, but I've seen it done and I've read about it, is that if you have a blister and to avoid having to re-drain it constantly, what you can do is you can take a needle with thread and do the same steps we did earlier. Sterilize the needle, sterilize the skin, if you can, wash it down with alcohol, and take a needle and put the needle through the blister and out the other side, but leave the thread hanging out of the skin. You then remove the needle, so now you have a piece of thread hanging out from the inside of the blister to the outside of the blister. And if you squeeze it, the blister will drain, but that piece of thread will act like a wick and allow the moisture or the fluid from the inside of the blister to continue to drain to the outside. So if you have a piece of gauze over it, the thread will act like a wick and continue to let the fluid drain from the inside of the blister. And this will happen even as you're walking or doing business throughout the day. It will continue to drain. And this is a way you can not have to worry about draining it 2-3 times a day and just have that constant open drain going, because the skin cannot heal because the thread is there in the way, and the capillary action from the thread will wick the moisture away. And in a day or 2, it will begin to stop filling up with fluid, and you can remove the thread and allow the blister to heal normally. And like I said, this is a good method that is commonly used by hikers all the time. I've just never done it myself. No matter what option you chose to drain the blister or treat the blister, you want to continue to monitor it. And what that means is you want to see if it's healing. If it doesn't appear to be healing on its own, if it's hot, feels warm and hot to the touch, more than the surrounding skin, if you notice it's turned red, if it's painful to the touch, it has an odor coming from it, a smell, an odor that's coming from it, or it's filling up with yellow or pus instead of the clear fluid or the lightly tinged fluid, then you want to go seek medical attention right away. It could be that you have an infection in your skin and you do not want to put this off because it could spread to other parts of your body and make you very sick. So seek out medical attention as soon as possible. Do not put this off. So just to review, if you can keep your feet clean and dry, or maybe you use some of these products, you tape them, or you use an anti-chafing cream or some sort of lubricant for your skin, you'll help reduce blisters. Another thing we can discuss is obviously your footwear and your socks. Choose a sock that is good for you, one that will wick moisture away, has some cushioning in it. Don't choose cotton socks that retain moisture and keep them close to your skin. We spend a lot of time on our equipment. Everybody always spends time researching tents and sleeping bags and packs, and we read all these reviews, but many people spend no time at all on picking a sock, or the shoe for that matter. And obviously certain shoes are better than others, and a review is very personal and specific. It's subjective. So I don't take everyone's review to heart unless it goes to quality of the shoe. If the shoes are running larger or smaller than size, or if they're telling me the quality of the shoe is bad. But a shoe may fit your foot differently than my foot. And there's no way we're really going to know how a shoe is going to feel and perform out on the trail till we take it on the trail. So we may have to put inserts in our shoe to even help make them feel better on our feet and reduce blisters. Those are things that can reduce the blister. It will change the way your shoe and your foot interact, and it may reduce blisters as well. So you can buy a cheaper insert and try it out. You don't have to spend a lot of money. Cover the blister, treat it, drain it, monitor it, and once again, if it turns red, you can feel heat coming off of it. It gets painful. It has pus draining from it instead of the fluid. Go seek medical attention right away. I hope you found this useful. I hope you will now look at your feet in a different way and take care of them while hiking. If you like what I'm doing, please leave a comment below. What's worked for you in the past? What hasn't worked for you? What you're doing now for blister prevention? If there's another product out there that I haven't mentioned that may be useful for other people. If you like what I'm doing, consider subscribing as well. And as always, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join me. Till we meet again. The best way to avoid blisters and it has a backing on the top, on the back, I mean, backing on the top. It has